Welcome to another edition of the Radio Coffee House Show, where Jesus meets coffee meets talk radio. And the next one starts right now. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Clint Armitage with the Radio Coffee House. So this next episode is called Nehemiah and the Prayer Challenge Part 4. And if you've been listening for any amount of time, or at least the last few weeks, you've heard us go through Nehemiah chapter 1, 2, and 3, and we were talking about prayer. Then we were talking about the opportunity that God gives you, and you go ahead and take it, and then recruiting people and getting people to figure out the vision that God has given you, and you're trying to pass that on to get people motivated to help you out to complete this project. And then chapter 3 was the actual building and getting people to do the work. Because obviously if God has called you to a larger project, you need that help. So we went through those portions there. And now we're going to be getting into chapter 4. And then I'm also going to be talking about a praise report that we have for the prayer challenge. Anyways, stay tuned and let's get into this. All right, thanks for coming back and thanks for listening in. Again, this is Clint Armitage with the Radio Coffee House, and I am so happy that you're here to join us today. We're getting into Nehemiah chapter 4, just like I said in the intro, and I also wanted to mention the fact that I normally don't do shows during, major holidays, but since we have 2 major holidays in a row, I figured that's a little bit too long to not do a show. So I went ahead and got this episode going so that we can get more into Nehemiah, get more into understanding prayer and how to run a ministry and a business, doing it with the model that Nehemiah has kind of given us here. And then now we're getting into chapter 4. Now we saw a little bit of resistance that Nehemiah got during the other chapters, but this time we're going to see real opposition to Nehemiah. So that is what part 4 is about. Chapter 4 and part 4 is about expecting and preparing for conflict. So whether you're in a ministry or you're running a business or whatever God's has put this burden on your heart for this project, whatever project's happening, in this case, the wall here for Nehemiah, it also will come with some opposition. So we saw a little bit of verbal opposition, a couple of chapters ago, but now we're looking into some real opposition that could create a little bit of fear. But you're going to see how Nehemiah responds to that. And then, so we're going to get into that. But first, God has truly blessed not only myself, but other people in this prayer challenge. They went out and done this prayer challenge, and I encourage you to do the same. If you have tried it, let me know what happened. You can email us at info@radiocoffeehouse.com. You can get us on Twitter, whatever. You can you message us. Whatever you want to do to get a hold of us, go to radiocoffeehouse.com and go to the Contact Us section, and then let us know what happened when you did the prayer request. I received some information and some feedback from someone that actually did it. And so what I want to do is I want to read the text that I received regarding her interaction doing the prayer challenge. Okay, so here it goes. Quote, "Hey, I have a praise report. I went out to lunch today with a friend. I remembered about praying for the servers. So we had a young man take our order, and I asked if he needed prayer. He said, quote, actually, yes, unquote. I was surprised because he had many piercings and tattoos, and he seemed a little rough and indifferent when we first sat down. He wanted to be there as we prayed, so he put in our order and came back to participate. Exclamation, exclamation." And then she says, "Awesome," all caps, couple of exclamations. She says, "I believe he received, and I also prayed that he would be busy and get great tips. He was very busy when we left. It is fun, and I will continue to do this. Exclamation, exclamation. Thank you, Jesus." So you see, that was a praise report that came in from someone that tried this prayer challenge. And again, it worked beautifully. Like I said, there's no awkwardness. The transition into asking a complete stranger if they need prayer is not awkward. It's not uncomfortable or anything for either party. And again, it was another success. God intervened, God interjected, and then God was introduced into a relationship that was basically non-existent, right? Because you got a couple strangers here. And then now God has been interjected into the conversation with prayer, and then someone received specific prayer for their needs, their wants, whatever was prayed for. And all it took was asking if they need prayer when the food came out, right? After the order and all that, whenever during that time frame. But she said, it was fun and I will continue to do this. So I encourage not only her to continue to do it, but I encourage everybody else that's listening to go out and try it. I'm serious. It works. It's so easy. And then someone gets blessed. They get blessed. You get blessed. And even the person you may be praying for, a family member of theirs, they get blessed as well. So it's such a good thing to do. And it works beautifully. So I encourage everybody to do it. So that was a great praise report. Now let's get into chapter 4. Let's find out what's going on with Nehemiah. Okay, here we go. Chapter 4, verse 1. It's opposition to the rebuilding. Here we go. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" So see, immediately now, because in chapter 3, they were actually building and they got a good amount of the wall completed. The process was there. It was like factory work. Everybody was pitching in. They were doing their things right in front of them. So everybody had their little area to work. And so things were moving along pretty smoothly. And so now we see these characters come back into the picture. Sanballat here is now mentioned. We're going to hear about the other guys as well, Tobiah and all that. We're going to hear about them too. But Sanballat is now verbally, he's getting incensed. The Bible says that he is greatly incensed. He is ticked off that the Jews were now building the wall. So a couple of things here. One, obviously, the Jews are not the devil's favorite people, right? Because they're God's chosen people. So anything that the Jews are trying to do to follow God's will, with Nehemiah here leading, the enemy is going to put up some opposition. So this is the opposition that they're getting right now. It's only, verbal put downs and everything right now in front of other people, associates, the surrounding neighbors. That's all that's happening right now. But we're going to see a little bit more forceful opposition here in a little while. So what we have here is Sanballat getting really ticked off that the Jews are building the wall because it's kind of successful. They're doing things that are working, and Sanballat doesn't want to see that. So he's bringing in, he has all these associates and all that, the army of Samaria and all that, and he is talking smack, and he's trying to rile them up because he's riled up. And so he's basically putting the Jews down here. Okay, let's move on to verse 3 here. Tobiah, the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What they are building, if even a fox climbed up on it, he would break down their wall of stones." And so, again, now we have Tobiah doing the same thing as Sanballat. They're getting together. Now they're putting down the Jews. And right now it's just verbal, but you can see they're already ticked off. So they're going to be getting a little bit more forceful here. So they are starting to rile up themselves and the crowd, the people, to get against the Jews here. So now here's where you hear what Nehemiah says here. In the next verses, it goes, "Hear us, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." So this is the response. Now you notice it's not Nehemiah, trying to get in their face and being violent to push them back with what they're saying. No, he is calling out directly to God. That's what we need to do. Once opposition rises against us, when we're doing God's calling, once that opposition is starting to push back against us, we have to call out to God. We have to ask the Lord to help. We have to ask the Lord to hear us, to help us. And that's what Nehemiah is doing. And so he's taking the right steps. So when we're talking about ministry, we're talking about business, you're going to run into roadblocks. Now, regular roadblocks just happen because of life. Or there's things that, maybe you're stepping into an area that you're not as familiar with, and so you're running into roadblocks because you don't know the process or whatever. Well, not only that can be opposition, which is, more benign, but this is now full opposition from people, where you're going to get that as well. You're going to get opposition you can even get opposition even from other Christians, from your family members, from people that are close to you that you think would support you in it, and then they don't. They actually don't. So these people are stepping up, and these guys are actually talking poorly about the Jews here to put them down, to discourage them, to get them to stop by verbally abusing using them here. But Nehemiah knows God is the one that has called us to us, and God is going to help us get this done. So he calls out to God. And that's what we should do when we're going forward on our business, when we're going forward on this idea that we have, when we're going forward on something that God has called us to. And there's where we have to call out to God to give us help. He kind of wants them out of the picture, to not forget that they're doing this stuff to them. And so he calls out to God. And then after that, right after he calls out to God here, Nehemiah then continues on in the next verse. This is what he says. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. So there's a couple of things there. What he's coupling, what he's putting together is what we should put together too when we're talking about pushing forward through the struggles, through the opposition, is we call out to God for help when there's obstacles. And then right after we call out for God, we have to expect that he's going to help us complete the job or get us past this obstacle, because he has put this project, this ministry, this idea, this business in front of us. We have to believe that that's what he's going to do. So right after he called out, he said, so we rebuilt the wall. So no matter what, there was opposition here. And then he comes out with a confident statement and says, so we rebuilt the wall. They don't have all the wall done, but they're getting a lot done. They basically got half the wall done. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height. All of it reached half its height. So that's half the wall. So they didn't let that stop them. They called out to God and then they pushed forward. And so that's sometimes we have to do that as well, because we're going to run into obstacles. We call it to God and then we push through it, rather than sit there and trying to analyze it, right? When we're trying to analyze the situation or the obstacles, and then we paralyze ourselves and we don't move forward. Sometimes we just got to just go through it after we've called out to God, right? We've just got to do it. So next verses here, we got verse 7. It says, but when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs and Ammonites, and the men of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's wall had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Again, what do we have here? So they're starting to build the wall. They get half its height. Now they even have more opposition. More people are against them. More people are coming. And now it's starting to get a little bit confrontational physically, because they said that there are, once they got the walls going up, they got really angry. Not only Sanballat and Tobiah, but now the Arabs, the Ammonites, and also the men of Ashdod. When they heard that this thing was happening, now there's multiple people, a lot of people against this. And then it says that they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. So now they're physically getting violent here. They're going forward to fight just because they don't want him to build it. And so what does Nehemiah do? Again, he does that same thing. But we prayed to our God and then posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. So again, another more opposition comes, and then he prays again. He calls out to God again. Same pattern. He calls out to God, and then he does something about it. He posts a guard day and night to meet the threat. So again, when obstacles come, when struggles come against us, we pray and then we push forward. We pray and then we do what God has called us to do. We have action after our prayer. We can't just pray and then hope and then expect something to drop out of the sky. Sometimes we have to pray, unless God says be still, we have to pray and then have some action behind it to fulfill the calling that he's given us. Okay? So let's move on from there. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit of negativity from the people. And it's because they're getting tired, right? And also, you know what plays into that? Sometimes we get ourselves more tired because we have some fear injected into that. And then we start to talk about giving up, which is what's happening here. They're getting some opposition, some real opposition, some potentially violent opposition. And now, it's coming to Nehemiah's attention that the strength of the laborers is going out. They are building it pretty fast. And so there is some physical fatigue, but know that whenever we get tired, it actually makes us mentally tired as well. And so we can't handle some of the, opposition or we think we can't handle as much opposition when we're tired. Do you notice when you're tired, you can't fight the good fight as well, right? Also, when you're hungry, it's tough to fight the good fight. So whenever whenever our physical needs are depleted, when our physicality is depleted a little bit, then it's tougher to fight and do what God's calling us to do, but we have to press on. In this case here, they're saying, hey, the strength of our laborers is going out because they have been working hard. But then you have some fear that's injected into it, and then it makes it tougher to move forward. Now they're looking at the negative parts of it. There is so much rubble that we can't rebuild the wall. They actually said they cannot rebuild the wall. Again, the negativity to the point where it is stopping them from moving forward, even though they're halfway done. Even though God is blessing them to get their project done, it is still difficult, especially when they have opposition. Okay? So again, back to the beginning of this, we have to expect and prepare for opposition. Okay, verse 11. Let's move on to verse 11. Also, our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to their work. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Okay, so again, more opposition to the point where this is where their intention is violence. Their intention is to kill the Jews. And so that's what you're seeing here. They're really putting the pressure on the Jews now. Okay, so there's a lot of pressure physically, mentally, and emotionally, and from internal and external forces. So it's getting very difficult for them to continue on. But this is what Nehemiah says. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. Okay, more of it again. We have it being so bad, the situation is becoming so bleak that people are starting to lose heart. So Nehemiah says, hey, I'm going to do something about it. We're going to station some people at the lowest points. We're going to get them to post it by families, right? And then we're going to have them with their swords and their spears, and basically their weapons are going to be ready. So he's acting or reacting to the threat by posting up guards and getting ready for a fight if these people were to come. Now he gets into the mental side of the Jews here. He has to let them know. He has to encourage them and remind them, hey, that God is still with us. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, fight for your daughters, fight for your wives and for your homes. And so he's talking to the men here and saying, hey, I know it's tough, but remember the Lord. The Lord is going to help us. So we have to fight. We have to give our all. Okay, so that's a little pep talk and getting them ready because there is potential conflict en route. So they're doing a few things to be prepared for it. Next verse. When the enemies heard that they were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to his own work. You see, so God was in it. God frustrated the plans of these evil guys that are coming in to disrupt and kill the Jews because they don't like what they're doing. Again, the enemy is against the Jews. But this time, at this point here, God has called them to this. So it's working out even though it may be difficult. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. Okay, so we're almost getting to the end of chapter 4 here, but we're seeing action being put in place, reaction actually. The threat is coming, so Nehemiah is placing strategically, tactically, placing people and getting them ready. And if you're working, hey, one hand's going to be on a sword and one hand's going to be on the work that you're going to be doing. And so he's strategically and tactically putting things into place to ensure that the work can go on while they can also still protect themselves. And then they're also calling out to God. that, they're also relying on the fact that God is with them, okay? And he says it again, that our God will fight for us. And that's where he ended that verse there. So final verses, we're going to read through this and then wrap it up. So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. At that time, I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night, so they can serve us as guards at night and work by day. Neither I nor my brothers, nor my men, nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon, even when he went for water. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 4 right there. Now, you can see what's happening throughout this whole chapter. The theme of this whole chapter is expecting and preparing for opposition. So you see how Nehemiah not only expects this opposition because he already got a hint of it, right? So you get a kind of a clue, whether it's in your ministry, your business, or your project, you get a clue where this opposition is going to come from, because there are going to be grumblings, there's going to be complaints. So you're going to hear a little bit, you know, out of the mouth is the overflow of the heart, right? So we're going to hear a little bit of grumblings, and now you can know, oh, okay, take note of that. There's some grumblings there. There's where we might have some opposition. So be prepared. So now this is what Nehemiah did. He expects it, expecting the opposition, and now he's preparing for it. And he's doing it tactically. He's tactically getting prepared by placing people in certain spots. He's also making sure everybody has a weapon on him. And then also he's doing it at certain times. He's got basically kind of like a guard shack set up here where he has people with eyes, you know, day and night, to make sure they can keep an eye on different areas where they need, where the, you know, the holes are, where they're going to need a little bit more protection because that part of the wall is not filled or whatever. So he's assessing the situation, just like we should do in our ministry and our business. We should assess the situation, expect, and then prepare for this conflict. And then when we step to it, we tactically engage the conflict with a response. We don't have to be overly aggressive, but we can prepare and sit and wait in a defensive position. And when it comes, be prepared. And let's not give up, because our God is going to help us complete this project. Is going to help us start this business. Is going to help us move through with this ministry, no matter what the opposition is. So there's chapter 4 from Nehemiah. All right, friends, my name is Clint Armitage. This is the Radio Coffee House. Thanks for joining in on this chapter of Nehemiah, chapter 4. And we'll be continuing to go on, probably a few more chapters that we're going to get through to complete this whole theme of what you can kind of base your model on, business model, ministry model, project model, with how Nehemiah is kind of showing us what to do. All right? All right, until next time, stay safe and God bless. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Radio Coffee House Show, where we're all about Jesus, coffee, and radio. We'll see you next time.